Here in the BBC outside broadcast unit. We're going today to discuss something, aren't we, Mary? We're going to discuss something. We're going to fix something, aren't we, Mary?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to fix the liturgy, aren't we, Mary?
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the liturgy. Over to you, Mary.
Which liturgy, Father?
What liturgy? Well, she doesn't know what liturgy means. Liturgy. Now, the word liturgy means liturgia, the work of the people. It's the same root as lay people, but the energy is also in there. All that to do with work. Now, it's the work that we do when we're handling the things of the Lord, and that goes back to pre-Christian times, because there was a notion of priesthood there already in Roman times and Greek times. So they're coming close to the numinous. The numen is the power that they cannot see, but they approach. Now, everyone in Ireland thinks they know a lot about liturgy, don't they? And they don't know quite as much about the numinous, do they? Yeah. Because they're all doing something very human most of the time, aren't they? Yes. It's all about me, isn't it, Mary? Yes. Absolutely. Now, what are your thoughts on the matter, Mary?
Well, the liturgy is about God, not about me. So it's there to venerate God and to give glory to God and praise. And we're blessed to have our clergy to unpack and open up the Word of God and to explain the beauty of the readings, and also then to lead us to God through the Holy Mass.
Now, you put your finger on the problem, Mary. You used an important word there, lead, and you added it also to God. Now, that goes back to another pagan notion which we've taken on board. It's the mystagogue. Now, the mystagogue is one who agogen, he leads unto the mystery. Now, this is to do with mystery, mysterium fidei, the mystery of faith. Now, that is the essence of it. Now, I think there is a serious problem because the essence of it has gone through the window and has been taken place by something else. You know what that is, don't you?
But do tell me where you're coming from with that, Father. I could think of a number of things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've been around enough to see what the number of things might be. Now, in practice, the problem is profound. It's not just one thing, and we're not going to handle just one thing, because otherwise we're handling just the symptoms of the illness. Now, as somebody who's in the medical profession, sort of, you know about symptoms, don't you? The symptoms tell you what? There's a malady somewhere down underneath, isn't there? An illness. Now, what is the illness that's happened now in our day?
Relativism.
Oh, well, yes, that's true. That's regard to teaching more than anything. But I meant something on the level specifically of liturgy. Do you not perceive, Mary, that the outworking of what we have on a daily basis is because things have gone somewhat wrong down there in the approach and understanding of liturgy, and even more to the fact that one cannot actually perform liturgy in a way which is coherent and meaningful and even valid on a spiritual level if one is not actually in the state of grace. And therefore one cannot perform theatre and be pleasing to the one that one is honouring, because liturgy starts on the level of the will. And therefore, if the person isn't obeying, if the person is actually in a dark place, that's the bit that must be sorted first. And then bring that up out on the different levels. What's going to happen is that person then is going to be camouflaging the fact that the real problem has not been handled. What do we do about that, Mary?
Well, Father, I think you would be the expert on what we would do about that, because I'm not really qualified to make that comment.
Excellent. Well, put this situation like that now. I believe that the real problem can be simplified somewhat in an optic of history, what actually happened up to the council, during the council and after the council, with regard to things that started to go somewhat awry. Now, in the years leading up to the council, there was already a liturgical movement going on way back, and in certain places more accelerated than others. The monastic world was involved, but others too, great experts, and they detected that there was a need to make liturgy what it was actually meant to be, precisely the work of the whole people. And therefore, that what was happening in the course of liturgy had to be involving everyone present. Because in practice, what had happened, not everywhere, but tendentially, was that the priest was at the altar and the people were in the pews doing something not exactly directly in harmony with what he was doing. They were doing their own thing. They were in prayer. And that was perceived as not exactly the meaning of the liturgy. So there was a thrust to open the liturgy up to people, for them to be actually praying the liturgy in their own mode and place. And that was healthy. And that was involving also several different levels, the whole level of music involvement and so on. That goes back as far as Pius X, who wanted to have people having what he already called active participation. So this went on. Now, in the council, there was the feeling that that had to be taken on board. And the first document that came out of the council was actually the one on the liturgy, Sacro Sacrum Concilium, and all the council fathers were still celebrating, of course, the Mass of the Ages. There had been a tiny bit of tweaking happening already under John the 23rd, but hardly anything to talk about. And the presumption was, and it was actually in the thrust of what they were putting in the documents, that the changes made were in view of that, and that any changes that were made would be in order to enable that to happen. So there was a clear optic of what was involved in the changes. There was no question of inventing something new. It was a question of organic development or evolution, if you like, natural transformation of the same into the same, but made more streamlined. Because in practice, that had not been completely addressed at the Council of Trent. What Council of Trent had done essentially was to take what was there, fix it, keep it and standardise it, and what was there were several families of liturgy coming through different sources. Therefore, what the result was, it was quite heavy. They had things happening at different parts of the Mass, not once but about 3 times. If you look at the structure of the old Mass, you're starting off more than once and so on. You've got different families coming there, and the same thing, the large number of prayers throughout are because they're taking all the prayers that they find there from antiquity, but in different families. So it's not one simple family that's come through. So it was very heavy, and therefore the tendency was for the priest to, he had to, because he only had half an hour at the altar, because another priest coming afterwards in days of old, so he had to have it all from amice to amice, half an hour. So in practice that means a pretty high speed to get through the very large number of prayers, including prayers before and after. And so anyway, that was the situation. So it led to also a liturgical illness, that of high speed. It was well known that the speed was quite high in the old rite, and that's also carried on actually in Ireland, because the same speed was carried on even in English, but that's another story. Now, what the Council Fathers therefore had in mind was, as it was put by Paul VI, to see again, create again the strong lines of architecture of the liturgy, which could be seen as they were when they were put there in the first place. Because what actually happened was that the ramification, the overloading, had made it difficult to see exactly the thrust. To calm it down and make it more, as it were, aerated. Now, in itself, that was a good notion, and it was carried on in a way initially which was going that way, because all those involved, the Council Fathers, the bishops, were all, of course, formed in that. All their life they knew exactly where they were coming from. But there was, immediately after the council, the handing on of the responsibility for it to the Concilium. It was a body of experts who were doing the work as quickly as they possibly could, so as to have something standardized, because there was a problem, an interim in which there was a moment of experimentation where things were allowed to be happening more or less just to see what was going to work. That was leading to chaos, and Paul VI had to step in and look, can you get this done, because it's going all over the place. And so they did, and they did 2 things essentially. One was the strong reform of the lectionary, the word. We didn't have a lectionary before, because all the masses up to the changes were always self-contained. They all had the readings in the same mass. But then the notion of having a much larger fare offered to the people, that was a lot of work, and the same thing happening in the breviary as well. There was a lot of work on the level of the word. The breviary is actually well produced, a good breviary produced, and in itself the lectionary is actually very good. There's a lot of hard work gone into that. By the way, the breviary has not been fully exploited, because the fathers had initially intended that there should be a 2-year cycle for matins, the office of readings. That has not been too much taken on board outside the monasteries, but that's another story. But anyway, So that bit was happening, but also then the bits with regard to liturgy itself. Now, if one looks at what came out of the concilium, that body of experts which were voting things very quickly, with power to do things which before had been reserved to the Holy Office, because anything touching liturgy was reserved to the Holy Office, and very stringent. That was happening very quickly in a very short time. Now, in practice, I'm oversimplifying, but there were forces in there which were taking on board notions which had not entirely been in the mind of the Council Fathers themselves, but they had the power to do it at that point. But it wasn't the same power that was given to the Council Fathers in an ecumenical council protected by the Holy Ghost. Here we have experts. And so what we had actually was something like this. The notion came in, right, we've got this work to do. Given that it's going to be so radical already, with the readings going to change and so on, we're going to do a complete revamping of it. And that's precisely what happened, because they revamped completely the thing and made essentially what seems to be a new creation, which has not had that continuity of development. However, having said that, there's a second problem which is linked to it. It's because that when it came to the application of the new in 1969, 1970, we're a little bit further away from the Council Fathers by then already, and there was a freedom in the air which meant the application of even that new liturgy was also exposed to other experts down the line, everywhere locally where there were experts, and they were then going to do their own thing. So we're going stage further each time from the initial protected guidance of the Fathers in the Council Fathers in the beginning, in the early 1960s. So what we had there was also a problem coming from the fact that those by then who were being the ones in the key places applying all this were becoming further and further from that long formation of the centuries, in fact, and certainly from the seminary, where they only had the old, and therefore they were exposed by an education which was total, of exposure to the sacred, all the minor orders leading up progressively to the priesthood and so on, the wearing of the cassock, the otherness of it all, the absence of women from the sanctuary, things which were taken for granted for centuries. That was all up now for grabs, and new forces were coming in which were not being protected as were the Council Fathers themselves. However, one can see two things. In itself, the liturgy that was coming out of the Second Vatican Council, if it studied word for word rubrics and words in the Latin, is actually, say what one wants to say, it can be, as Paul VI meant, it can be seen to be that everything there can be seen to be coming out of what was there already, because there's nothing there which wasn't there already in some shape or form, or more or less, before, but it's been streamlined. And there are certain things which are even there still in the rubrics, which presume that one is still facing the other way, because there are instructions given more than once. At this point the priest has to face the people, therefore he's not facing the people otherwise. The forcing of the order facing the people was not even imagined by the Council Fathers themselves, nor was the exclusive use of the vernacular, because it was presumed that at least the canon would be the Roman canon, and it would be in Latin. The new use of new ones, new prayers, Eucharistic prayers, came in with the concilium bit, and that was reworked completely, new canons coming in basically, and therefore there was a lot of freedom coming in which had not been envisaged. Now in practice, having said that, what can happen is that if one looks carefully, one can still retrieve what Benedict XVI wanted, that one can have this hermeneutic of continuity, that one is having the feeling that was always there of the sacred, the approach which was always there, the maintaining of the bits there which are still there and can be used, and the same approach to the sacred. And one can, therefore, do what was truly in the mind of the Council Fathers, because it doesn't have to be necessarily a refuge in a safe zone, rejecting all the renewal, which is what happened as a result of the abuses, by going only to what he was allowing the old rite. And again, because that is what has happened in practice. There's been such a reaction to this other stuff coming later on that people have been horrified and have found only in the old rite what was actually their secret wish. And people there right now in a difficult situation because they can't put it into words, but quite often they know that can't be right, that can't be right, that can't be right. There's something missing, and they suddenly come to a celebration where actually it is correct, and they don't want to leave it again. Now, therefore, there are places where one can find still what the Council Fathers have in mind. One is a good contemplative monastery, or actually, strangely enough, on the other extreme, one can find spontaneously given by the Holy Ghost in groups of prayer, authentic groups of prayer and adoration and fellowship. One can find the same instincts coming through to honour God, and it comes through again in a newer form, but it is there. I found the two things in France and in Italy. Ultimately, it was French in Italy. We had maintained everything in the old rite, but the old externals of the old rite, but it was the new rite. And it looked like the old, but it was the new rite, and it was the thought of Benedict himself. And Benedict XVI was aware of our existence and was glad of it. But there are other places I found also in France when there were, for instance, large congregations in the renewal monastic type. They were doing things very, very well in the new rite because they were coming from an approach which was the same approach as the other. The approach was the same. Adoration, creating beauty, respect, otherness, the maximum for God, and it was coming through again. And therefore I felt it's not either or, but it's both and. The problem is that it's become polemicized and there's become this element of either or, this or that. It's not, as we say in Latin, out, A-U-T, A-U-T, either or, but et. And that's the problem that's difficult for people to find nowadays. The only norm accepted out there, usually nowadays, is the one that they've only had, and they think anything else is odd. They haven't moved around sufficiently. And that's part of our problem in Ireland, I feel. People have not seen the whole picture of the Catholic Church and its Catholicity, because there is very, very good renewed liturgy out there, but people in Ireland have only got what is Irish, and it's not doing any good. Over to you, Mr. Starter.
So would that account for the fact that so many young people at this time are being drawn towards Mass in the extraordinary form?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that they see that sort of the order and the mystique and
exactly.
The fact that there is, God is mystery. We can't analyse and expect to come up with put him in a little box and then just say that this is the way God is today, because he's mystery. So, and in the eternal now, and we're not God, quite simply. So yes, but the Mass in the extraordinary form, or the Latin Rite Mass as they call it, is the only other, apart from the Novus Ordo, that we have.
Well, we have the other rites within the Church. We have various Eastern rites within the Church which are allowed, but they're not accessible to the people outside the main cities, and they also you don't want to go, sometimes they contain other languages. But having said that, the problem is that there's no way one can influence what has already happened massively outside there on the parish level, because people now have got to a situation where the tolerance level is very low. They do not put up with anything which is going on more than in parts of Ireland you're expected to be out of church half an hour later, aren't you, roughly? And that's what's become the norm, 40 minutes at the most. So what does one do with that?
Well, that's sort of the mob rule dictation, rather than God's manner.
So the issue is profound, because that's the one locus where the people of God actually encounter God and each other. And to use that then as the point to encounter each other more than the other is something completely out of place. Speeding it up as much as possible by all the means that can produce, it's not healthy. And also the element precisely linked with the other, that happens more easily because the other bit quite often is missing. People are not able anymore to be still before God, because when they're in genuine adoration, they will feel the need for that to be extended in liturgy which is serene and prolonged. If they're all the time into hyped mode with the other stuff not there, that'll be what will be picked up in liturgy. When we play into the gallery, pleasing those to go keep them in church.
I think, Father, you're talking about the speed of the liturgy. I mean, I know that there's perhaps pockets where that is the format for the liturgy, but particularly in the north of Ireland, and particularly at the weekend, the Sunday Holy Mass, they can be up to an hour.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, at least at least 45 minutes, but an hour, and if there's a lot to be presented, then it can be slightly longer.
But that's good.
Yeah, no. So it's not that that quick sort of format, and I think knowing that the clergy feel that that's the only time they maybe have a congregation there to feed and to teach, so they make the best use of that time.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, and I think it is good news. It's very sad if it's going to be a speed through, but and even during the weekday masses in the north there's normally a homily.
Yeah, that's good. And that was wanted by the Council Father. The word should be heard and expanded, because people need nourishment. If one gives them the Italian word is ferverino, a little thought every day, it goes a long way for the day.
And it's well, personally, I find it's invaluable.
Yeah, I conclude with a true story. When I was an altar boy, our parish run by Ampleforth, and there were 6 or 7 monks there. They'd have different, one celebration after the other. And on a Saturday morning, I'd be there, and I'd go to the 8 o'clock one, I might even serve it, but I stayed on for the beginning of the conventual Mass. They had the Office of Lords sung together, and then they had the conventual Mass later on. But I stayed for the beginning was I found very interesting, because it was Tom Kevin who would preach. Tom Kevin would preach. I'll give you an example of his homily. On a weekday. I was walking down the docks there the other day, and I was admiring these huge gas cylinders. They were going up and they were going down according to the pressure of the gas for the city of Cardiff and all the Vale of Glamorgan. I thought to myself, wouldn't it be just great to be able to be sitting on the top of these gigantic gas cylinders and to go up and down, and to admire from the top the whole of the Vale of Glamorgan, and then to come back to the little bit before me, because when one's at the top, one gets the long view of things. We need the long view of things, Mary, don't we? Yes. We've fixed the liturgy. We've fixed the liturgy, Mary, definitively. We've fixed the liturgy. Thank you.